It's March. Spring football should be here. Just a weird year. Still not used to it. We'll continue to talk about it until we get back into the swing of things. Lots of stuff coming up on today's show, though, because we have a long lead into spring visits and what I think might be a pretty important time of this year for Penn State football with some of their key recruits. As these guys have written about over at BWIillustrated.com, Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz are reporters that do a great job covering Penn State football and Penn State football recruiting, trying hard not to call you guys experts, insiders, just reporters. You've broken all the way, I've beaten you all the way back down to just reporters. So guys, welcome to the show. What have you been reporting on over at the site? Ryan, you have something about Messiah Mickens you're working on?
Yeah, we're working on something. So I'll talk about it when it's done. Put it that way.
Perfect.
I didn't know you were going to bring that up. I'm sorry, T. Frank. We're working on something.
It exists. You have it's in the
news.
That's all we want. That's all I want. There's some news coming later today. Hopefully, whenever it comes, Ryan is working on an update with Messiah Mickens. So that's coming up today. Fitz, what are you working on?
I just had a double take because there's so many Messiahs running around right now that it's just I was surprised because I wrote about Messiah Hampton last night. So it's we get that every couple of cycles, just guys that pop up with not odd names, but ones that are distinct. We'll say that. So
if Penn State gets both of them, does that mean it's the second coming of Messiah?
No.
And that'll do it for us this week. No show next week. Spring break is taking place. Okay.
All right. So let's get into it. Unless you had more you wanted to say. Now that I've derailed the show.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think it is important to repeat no show next week because of a spring break. And we've got a little bit of football coverage coming this afternoon. We get our weight room access, which is always fun. Like it's always a good time. T. Frank and I will be there. It's very limited seating, so just two of us on hand this Thursday afternoon. Can't wait to see some of those guys work out. We're not going to get the whole team, but we're going to get half the team, and it's not going to be a max day. So T. Frank, if you already lifted today, you'll be fine. It's not going to be a max. Okay. It's just going to be a regular squat day. Then we'll also get Chuck Losey, which is always insightful. Like one of the most insightful things that we get throughout the winter and the off season is him talking about new guys, old guys, transfer guys, whoever's in that room. And he does a good job of it. He's getting up to GALT status, I would say, from that standpoint.
Yeah. And it's always a good time to learn from somebody who's around the players all the time. And as Fitz is kind of pointing out, getting the information on kind of the day-to-day this time of year, what they've been working on and who's, catching the eye of somebody who it seems like he's probably a very supportive coach, but still looks like a guy who's very hard to please to like, oh yeah, that's good. Like that's a good thing that stands out.
Yeah, he's got pretty high standards. And actually you hit on a really good point there. I don't know if you tried to or not, but like he's the guy that's around everyone all winter. Like the coaches have a certain amount of time that they can spend with the players. And that's why you see twice a week, the workout of the day, maybe 3 times a week, the workout of the day. Those are sessions that those coaches can observe. Whereas Chuck Losey, Jeffrey Earls, all that whole staff, that whole strength and conditioning staff, which is fantastic, and they've done a really wonderful job. No matter who is leading that charge, they spend every waking hour pretty much with these guys. So that's kind of where your insight is going to come from, is from seeing these guys. There's so much you can take away from winter workouts. There's no games, there's no stats, there's no this guy caught the ball, dropped the ball, whatever. It's like progress being made on the physical side, which you need. So it's a hope springs eternal type time of year. And Chuck does a nice job throwing a cold bucket of water on it, but at the same time gives us some pretty good insight.
Yeah. I by the way, I do listen to you guys, and when you guys say that, I used to tell my wife, it's not that I don't listen, it's that it takes me about 5 or 6 times to really like stick in my brain. Ryan, one of my favorite things that you do is the what we learned, recapping and kind of nutshelling some of the conversations that we've had over the last month, February. A little bit different this year than some previous years, with everyone and their mother scheduling an official visit to a lot of different schools. But BWIillustrated.com, just to remind people, you can go there, sign up for $1, read the full thing that Ryan wrote about what we learned this February from Penn State Football Recruiting. You can sign up for just $1, and then if you like us after a week, you can sign up for the full year. If not, well then, no hard feelings. We'll see you later. You're always welcome here on the YouTube show, but we think that if you try us out, you're going to want to stay for that full year. So Ryan, what are some of the highlights of what you learned about Penn State recruiting this last month?
Yeah, we'll start with where you started, right? And that's the official visits. And I believe when I wrote that the other day, we were at 55. I believe we're at 58 or 59 now. There's been a handful of guys who have confirmed over the last few days. And that really goes back to, what are you doing there, Sean? You breaking something?
Yep, throwing stuff.
It really goes back to the rule change, or what we expect to be a big rule change. I kind of get in that in the story. And if you read a notebook a couple weeks ago, I hit on explaining those details. But the main thing to know is back in November, when, of course, everybody was focusing on the season, the NCAA put out a change that kind of went under the radar a little bit. At least I felt at the time it kind of did. And now it really is showing the change. And that's that schools should have unlimited unofficial visits this year. It has not been fully announced yet. The change that they made in November was temporary. It's supposed to end March 31. But, just look at the way schools are scheduling official visits right now. And Penn State is as aggressive as anyone. Like I said, they're almost at 60 now. And we're seeing this throughout the country as far as that aggression. And when you have unlimited official visits, and to clarify, it used to be 60 something, 70 something. I forget the exact number. Apologize. But when you have that, ability to just not have to overthink, who's realistic or what positions are more important, it allows you to just kind of go all out it and bring in guys maybe who probably are a little unrealistic, but you can shoot your shot, right? And that's, I think, one thing we've really seen with some of these guys who have scheduled. So obviously there's a bunch of regional players as well who, we do think Penn State has a better chance with. And there's some national guys too that I think they got a real shot with. But the big takeaway was really kind of, one, how many they've scheduled, two, the impact on why that happened. And then three, also, we really kind of learned their board, I feel like, through all these official visits. We always kind of knew that there were a handful of national guys that they had a lot of interest in, the staff had a lot of interest in. But now seeing those players, go through with an official visit to Penn State kind of gives us a better feel for, well, hey, maybe there's a better relationship here than what I thought leading into the month. So, with 60 official visits scheduled, you got 8 or 9 commits. We have a pretty good feel for who their top targets now are at the majorities of positions. And there's probably 10, 15 guys, Sean, that we have circled that you haven't really heard from yet, but we have a pretty good feeling for who those guys are. So if you add those in with the 60 or so that have a OV scheduled, I think for 75 guys, you kind of really can pinpoint now who are those key 2026 targets moving forward.
It's not just that. It's sorry, T. Frank. It's not just that. It's figuring out who the actual competition is. You've got guys with top 12s, and you're going to take 5, 6. Some guys taking 7 visits, and that really gives you an opportunity to feel out the competition, feel out the appropriate, we'll say, bid. It's much more complicated than that, but figure out what you're dealing with and how deep you're in it. So yeah, I think you're trying to find out these guys that have all these check marks and have 40 offers. Well, if you're going to come around and you're going to visit Boston College and Virginia and the schools that are not on the level that you're trying to compete with, then that says something about that. Now, of course, you stick to your evaluation. You always want your evaluation to be number one, but it gives you a little bit of a sense of narrowing it down without narrowing it down. We all know that we love top 15 lists here, but it's usually comes down to about 5 schools, if that, from a legitimacy perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense in terms of, I was actually going to ask you, Ryan, do we know more or less about the recruiting board? Because if you can scattershot, you can add as many guys as you want, even guys maybe that are unrealistic. Do you think that before it was more of, okay, these are the ones we absolutely have to get on campus, these are the must gets for us, as opposed to now where you can kind of see, is it more or less useful to you, do you think, to know more?
More. Without a doubt, more. Yeah. So, I mean, you're not wrong with that, T. Frank, but those OVs, don't get me wrong, there have been some scheduled in February and March over the years, but for the most part, a lot of those guys were doing that more so in April. Was that fair, Sean? Would you say I felt like that's when we learned guys would take spring visits and then they will kind of take those OVs and through spring visits, you could also kind of do the math and figure things out. But really having it kind of thrown in front of your face, this early helps me a lot now figure out, okay, here's the 6 or 7 linebackers, here's the 5 or 6 corners to really focus on. So yeah, there are more names out there, guys, again, that, like you said, they're kind of shooting a shot with, but again, if those guys are taking OVs, there is some interest there to some degree. And sure, Penn State might be 6 out of those 6 OVs, but there's enough of a relationship there where at least the guy's going to schedule it now. Whether that actually happens in May or June, spring visits will play a big part in that. But just understanding who has enough of a relationship with the staff to set those certainly helps figure out, for me at least, where to focus on moving forward.
And I was looking at Michael Carroll's Twitter profile yesterday and for something else. And he set up his Penn State official visit on April 9th. And, that's a priority target last year. So we're talking like 2 months, like ahead of schedule compared to where we were last year. It'll be interesting to see. I still think that this is not going to completely blow up, but there's going to be a lot of alterations to those lists. So maybe in April, we're doing the same thing again. And we were talking about different dates for different players and how this works, because, you're going to have to, Penn State's not going to take 75 guys, but you want to figure out the priority guys, go from there, figure out the ideal weekends, which June 6th, June 13th, ideal weekends for uncommitted prospects. Of course, May 31st, the committed weekend, or mostly committed weekend. So work around that and just try and lean on those guys, because I tell you what, man, it'll be here before you know it. But in the process, it's like raising kids, Ryan. It's like it goes so fast in hindsight, but from day to day, it's gonna drag on. So I think it's gonna be a situation where we're gonna be at official visits before you know it, but at the same time, there's gonna be a lot of twists, turns, roller coasters until then. That can include guys committing. That can include guy, Jerquay and Guilford decommitted last week. That can it can involve a lot of things. So I'm curious to see where we're standing 2 months from now, and if that visit schedule is the same as it appears right now.
For sure, no doubt. Go ahead, T. Frank.
I was just going to segue into the last point in what you learned, and Creighton Guilford is part of that conversation of the decommitment, and also the turbulence around Messiah Mickens. I know I caught you off guard, like just promoting the fact that you have a little bit more on that story, but that's part of the story, is that kind of the drama of recruiting, of what you think is secure suddenly isn't. And so what did you learn about Penn State through the coaching changes and some of the things that happened with those players?
Yeah, well, I want to get back to the other thing I have listed in that story too, T. Frank. I want to hit on 2 of them real quick before we move on to a different topic. But to jump to this one, I think it's pretty simple with Mickens and Guilford. I mean, Guilford camped at Penn State in July, took 1 visit, and committed a week later. Okay, now, like in retrospect, looking back on that, are you really that surprised that he opened up his commitment? I'm not. And I get that there was a good relationship there. And, we always have to walk that line at the time of like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Good relationship, all that stuff. But when you think about, well, these schools aren't going to stop recruiting this kid. And then also as schools continue to learn more and new offers come, Michigan offered the other day for Guilford. It's not that surprising that recruitment was the first one to commit and then decommit, because again, it was really 1 visit. And even, I mean, Sean, as you know, like he was actually talking about committing before he visited. Like we thought that Guilford was going to commit and then visit. And then he decided to come and then do it a week later. But the point with that is just, he was really on campus one time and then got to the end of his season and wanted to get it over with. And, now here we are with other schools showing interest, and it's not a surprise. So let's see where that goes. Penn State will still certainly be in the mix. Will they get an official visit? That'll be really interesting to watch. I'm curious to see if they can circle around and get them there. The numbers aren't in their favor. We did the math the other week. It's what is it? Matthias Barnwell and Michael Parsons.
Jamil Pollard as well. Yeah.
Oh, Jamil Pollard. I forgot. But that was before Franklin though, right?
That was pre-sanctions. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I just was doing the math for Franklin the other day. But either way, it's still like 5% of the decommitments have actually ended up, coming to Penn State then. So it is put that to the side. We'll see what happens. With Mickens, it's simple too. You know, it's a coaching change there, and I do think that there was a little bit of Messiah who was interested in taking visits. We hit on this in a show a couple weeks ago. I think I thought there was. He went to South Carolina with Lex, right? Like I thought there was a little bit of him that wanted to see, you know, some other schools and check things out. And, you know, when you have Jaywan Snyder then leave, it opens the door for that. So neither of those two things I think are very surprising. I think Penn State absolutely has a great chance of keeping Messiah Mickens. We'll see where it goes, though. I think in the end, it will be probably Penn State or Notre Dame. Maybe another school will merge. But to me, it's going to probably end up being he sticks with Penn State or he goes to Notre Dame.
Just quickly, I want to jump in here. We can wrap up after this, but there's something that happened that I think was actually rather funny given the context. So this morning I woke up to something on the message board. And if you've never been on the Blue White Illustrated message board, you create threads, right? You create a topic and then people respond to that. They click into it. And one of them was, how do I go about starting a franchise on the message board? And first off, I was like, shocked, and then my brain immediately flipped into go mode, and I told that person about Andy Ludicky at My Perfect Franchise. It's perfect. First off, I don't know how they didn't know about him already because of the fact that we've been doing this for so long here on the BWI Live show. Andy is a college sports fan. He loves recruiting. He loves the conversation. He's a Texas fan. You can forgive him for that, but he thinks like you if you're on the message board. He has probably a similar background to you if you're on the message board. And if you have a situation where you have the skills and you're looking for a new path in life and you are considering, how do I work for myself? How do I end the volatility as best I can of other people making decisions about my life? Andy is your guy. He can help walk you through the process from beginning to end, and the service is 100% free to you. So call him at 404-973-9901. If you go on the Blue White Illustrated message board, you can find that thread. There's also a link to his calendar. So you just go put yourself on his calendar when you have an opening and when he's available. And then you can schedule a conversation to talk. And that's what it is. You talk, you learn whether or not you're a good fit for whatever it might be, whether it is you have enough financial capital to even start a franchise, or if you have the right skills to go into a certain sector. He has done this for a lot of people, including people from the Penn State football community and the Penn State community overall. So check him out, Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. Always appreciate him supporting the show. Always appreciate people asking about that on the message board. I've never been more confident in answering a question on the message board than I was answering that one. So getting back to our conversation about what we learned in February, you wanted to wrap up with some other things, Ryan, going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, just all the new offers that went out in January, right? I mean, there was like 70 of them. And in February, you figured out was who's actually interested, who really actually got that offer and wants to visit. And you have the Amari Polidor, for example, down in St. Francis. I know St. Francis. Let's see what happens there. But he's gonna visit for an OV, and I think he's going to be here in the spring as well. I wanted to mention Garrett Witherington as well, a good-looking defensive line prospect out of Alabama. You know, he confirmed he's going to take a spring visit, already has an official visit set. Sean, you wrote a story on Brian Harris. Go ahead.
Wait. Before that, remember what I said about Witherington, the Parker Cothran comparison did come up on the board.
Oh, did it? I didn't see it. I'll have to go find that then.
Inevitable, you know, it was minus big money, but it was coming and they got there. But and again, it actually kind of makes some sense if you look at how he plays and his body type and what Penn State's going to look for in a potential guy, one of those guys that's listed as an edge, probably going to be an interior defensive lineman.
And,
right in the wheelhouse.
Alabama too, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it. Anyway,
there's one other factor in there as well, which, you know.
Oh, he's white? We can say it. It's not a bad thing. It's okay. Like he's a white Alabama defensive lineman. I get it. I understand why people will compare it. Anyway, Gannon Smith, two other offensive linemen who got offers in January. They're going to take visits. So just, again, sorting out all those visits through January and who actually is seriously interested, how it's going to play out, who's going to take spring visits. Because spring visits, we're talking to all these OVs, but spring visits are actually way more important in my eyes, at least at the moment, because that's going to set the tone for all this stuff moving forward. You disagree, Sean?
So you added at the moment, which makes sense because these are going to happen. So guys like Caden Gebhardt, guys like Alex Haskell, going to jump on and maybe not take official visits, maybe have a decision before that. So yeah, it's going to be very important for those guys. I'm very curious to see, and we saw this during junior day, winter season, how valuable those are, because you've got guys that are kind of putting it in neutral right now, having those official visits set up. They don't want to miss out on the all expenses paid trip. I certainly don't blame them there. Yeah. But how important are these visits going to get? Yes, it can net you a few commits, but you're still going to be looking to the summer as your potential, like that's got to be your bell cow right there is the official visits. So I'm very curious how active some prospects will be. You look at, there's a bunch of guys from Florida that have official visits set up. Most of them probably not going to come up during the spring to Penn State. Most of them probably going to take 5 or 6 officials. It's part of the calendar now. It's part of the game now. And then the coaches will go on the road after the blue-white game and have a contact period, as opposed to the traditional spring evaluation period, spring contact period. So what you saw in January, where Phil Troutwine, Terry Smith, Ty Howell, these guys pop up at schools and take pictures with the guy, with the prospects, and watch them work out and actually have conversations. Maybe going, I have to double check on the in-home for the spring, but you can actually have contact now. It used to be with the spring evaluation period, you would just go out, watch them play basketball, bump into them in the hallway, and then that would be it. Now all of a sudden it's an active recruiting period, as opposed to just a, hey, we're gonna see what's out there type period. So I think that's an interesting change. It came last year. You and I weren't prepared for it. Like we didn't realize what was going on until coaches started popping up in photos with prospects, and we're like, is this legal? Should we send? Yeah, but no, that's kind of where we're looking with the next couple of months. Now, I do think they will be important. You had a comment from Peter Bork, right? About spring visits, and he mentioned the blue-white game, but he also mentioned coming for a practice and the value. You kind of got to gauge your value system here for what you can get out of a spring game versus what you can get out of a personal visit for a spring practice, because you're going to spend more time with the coaches. You're going to spend more time with Danny O'Brien on the chalkboard and Andy Kotelnicki talking about the offense. Whereas if you come in for the blue-white game, you're going to see the blue-white game and have a great time. And don't get me wrong, it will leave a massive impression. But at the same time, if you're researching to make the best decision possible, which is still happening in recruiting, folks, it's not just highest bidder for everyone. Kids still pick the schools for the same reasons they picked them 10 years ago. Now, money clouds it quite a bit. And it's really interesting to watch the reaction when somebody decommits, when somebody goes elsewhere. But there's still a recruiting relationship aspect of it, and I don't think that's going away.
Well, let me do 2 things real quick. One, Bork, I just want to elaborate on that a little bit more too. Like, the recruiting has been so sped up in recent years, and I feel like I've been saying that for 10 years now. But my point with that is the important guys who are going to come in April have already probably been to the blue-white or been to a whiteout game or a major game at Penn State. And yes, some of them have also done those individual visits, but I still think you get a lot more out of learning the day-to-day of what it's like to be a Penn State football player overseeing another game, especially the spring game, right? I mean, you guys love the blue-white game.
Not just the spring game, but they've been to regular season games at this point as well.
And that's my point. Yeah. Like, fans love the blue-white game because it's a day to tailgate, have fun, do all that stuff. But you can only get so much out of the game, so much out of the experience. And if you've already been to a whiteout game and 1 or 2 others, what are you going to get out of that? So in the ideal world, what really Penn State wants is they want as many of their top guys to come, April 5th, April 13th, maybe the week before, and then try to come back for the blue-white game because it's so late in the year and there's no other games within the region. Like, that's the ideal situation.
Double dip.
Yeah, exactly. For Peter Bork, he can't really make a trip down here till the mid-April to the end of April. So if you got to choose between April 18th seeing a spring practice or April 26th seeing the blue-white game, it makes a lot more sense to come to the spring practice, spend time with the staff. He can stand right next to Danny O'Brien throughout that entire practice and really even interact with the players and all that stuff too. So it makes way more sense for that.
You get to see way more actual football if you go to a practice than you do a spring football game, which I think is a great point.
And Ryan, I'm running over the 2024 blue-white game, our list from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com last year, and 2 players that were not committed at the time in the class of 2025 ended up committing to Penn State, and that was Randy Adarica and LeVar Arrington II. So it's not a full-on. I mean, it is a full-on recruiting weekend, but it's not a current class game changer anymore like it used to be. Now, you go down the list of 2026 guys that are there. So that would be this year's 2027 guys. Messiah Hampton was there. Travis Johnson was there. Carter Bonner and Khalil Taylor from Western Pennsylvania were out there. You just keep going down the list. There's some really good guys as I continue to scroll. Marlon Bright, Emmanuel Iannacho, Carter Scruggs, Max Hiller is always here. But yeah, there's a lot of guys in that next class that we will be talking about. Daniel Jennings was there, and as an uncommitted prospect. A lot of guys that we'll be talking about this official visit season were there for the blue-white game in 2024, and I expect that to be the case in 2025 or 2026 as well.
With the recruiting period, the spring recruiting period, and whether it is coming before the blue-white game or at the blue-white game or after, as you just pointed out, Fitz, it does feel like it's important to set the table for the official visit period, though. And I know that there's some things that we've talked about at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com with some of these specific players about, you guys have highlighted Caden Gebhardt as one of the guys you would imagine is up for would they commit during the spring. I guess from that perspective, it's still important to get some of your guys off the board during spring football. Fitz, I know you've talked a little bit about NIL influencing this decision, but Ryan, from that perspective, if you can get a guy like Caden Gebhardt or I don't know, one of the other names you've been talking about here, how important is it to still get some of those guys to commit to your team so that you have that banked into and you understand what your class looks like heading into official visits?
Well, if you have 3 commits, I would say pretty important. Penn State has 8 right now. So it's not, I think Penn State's tied for like 3rd in the country at the moment for the most commits. So they're in a good shape. Again, there's a lot of other schools, smaller ones, even Big Ten schools that don't have nearly as many. So you want to build momentum, right? And for those schools, I think it's massively important. Don't get me wrong. Penn State wants to get guys on board, especially their top targets, whatever. Sooner than later is better. They'll take that. But I do feel like the guys they have committed plus their board and what we've seen from official visits and stuff, like it's not the end of the world if they don't have 12 commits by May. Like I think that's fine. Like they're in a situation where, again, because of how aggressive they've been with OVs and because they're aggressive staff recruiting wise and relationship wise, that they'll be okay with that stuff dragging out till June. Just with Caden Gebhardt, I just want to add, like he now has spring visits set with all of his top schools, and then Notre Dame just recently offered the other day too, which is another spring visit he's set. So I feel like we've been talking about him as a commit for a while, and he said it right, or as a guy who could make a commitment soon. Let me clarify that. But as things have progressed, he gets that Clemson offer. Tom Allen, of course, goes to Clemson. Now he has a Notre Dame offer. Notre Dame was a school he camped at last year, did not get an offer right away. So the fact that he camped, though, kind of shows you how interested he is in that. I kind of am now starting to think that this is going to drag out a bit. Do I think he's going to make it to official visits? That I'm still not sure about. But I could see this going into April now, where originally I thought, man, I wouldn't be shocked if he committed to Clemson this upcoming weekend. But the way he's scheduling visits and the fact that Notre Dame recently offered, I kind of get the impression that this is going to probably go into April.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a change from what we've been talking about for sure.
Yeah, well, the Notre Dame offer changed a lot, and in some ways, I think it's good for Penn State, honestly, because I didn't think Penn State was trending there, and now he has 2. Caden Gephardt's the perfect example of what Penn State wants. He's going to come in early April, and because their spring game is later than everybody else, he's going to come back for that as well. And he kind of reminds me of Brandon Finney in some ways, where it's like last one who gets him on campus might be not as a player, Sean. I'm talking about the way he's going about recruiting.
That's Corey Adamson. That's my domain. You stay out of there.
I'm talking about just the way his recruitment is playing out. Like there's a little bit of that last one who gets him on campus might be the winner kind of vibe, if that makes sense. And I'm starting to just wonder, with Penn State getting 2 visits, how much is that going to help him? We'll see. We don't know how much Notre Dame is going to impact him too. So let's see how it plays out. But I thought there was a real chance that he wouldn't get back to Penn State Now I'm starting to think, yeah, there's a real chance this goes all the way through April.
Interesting. Anything else here on spring visits either you want to bring up, because we've got another.
Oh, there's a ton.
Yeah. All right. Go for it.
I mean, we haven't talked about Alex Haskell, right? I mean, I feel like that's one we kind of need to hit on, because if Penn State's going to get a commitment in April, he's the one I think you have to circle at the moment. Would you agree, Sean? He's not going to take official visits. He's made that clear that
you want him to take an official, because if he takes an official, it means he's committed to you. So
correct.
So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Hey, real quick, when you look at his schedule, and I know we haven't put it out there for everybody on YouTube, but I'm kind of surprised he's not just taking official visits in April. Like, he's going to pay for these visits on his own, where he's going to do overnights at all these schools. He's doing one in Syracuse in March, and then all the other ones, I believe, are in April. Well, why don't you just bump it back a little bit and just do official visits all throughout April? I feel like I could talk to his dad. Why are you paying?
Syracuse in March, and I would prefer to get paid to do that. So yes,
fair.
But it is interesting. It is interesting that making a decision timeline, and I think Caden Gebhardt kind of feels the same way. What you just talked about, of a guy who's making these visits to priority schools during spring football and not during the official visit season. And so I guess that's, if there is one guy, Alex Haskell, as you mentioned, is that guy. What's the thought process of doing that in terms of, I know you said of why don't you do it this way, but why?
Once you get it over with, it's flat out. But here's I want to clarify one thing you said there, T. Frank. You said during official visit season, April 1, they can take official visits. It doesn't really happen because schools want to backload these official visits. I did this notebook a couple of weeks ago. It was on like a Saturday. It kind of went buried a little bit, but like schools, Penn State, when that rule changed, which I think was like 2017-ish, Sean, I want to say, like there were a bunch of schools who did April official visits. Penn State had like 8 or 9 OVs for the first blue white game. Again, I want to say like 2016, 2017.
Like Marquise Wilson and Tyler Rudolph that year.
Yes. Yeah. And they got commitments from those two guys, but they also didn't commit until like May. And those were also two guys that they were already in good shape with. My point was, a lot of schools did that early on, and they learned this doesn't actually make a lot of sense, because a lot of these guys are still going to wait until the summer. So why use it as early as we did? And it's all, trial and error, right? And that's how June became this key month of, this is when we're going to host guys for official visits, because that became the month closest to those players making their decisions. So that's kind of how that all
the dead period was an artificial deadline. So, and now you're taking July out of the game. So there's no lash bash in July. There's no any sort of
reason to wait.
Nate just texted me and distracted me. There's no sort of like finality, like except for the end of the open period in June. Sorry, I just fell over myself, and
did T. Frank's computer shut down again? I don't see him.
It did. Am I here now?
I see so. 3 of you. So
all right, perfect. Everyone loves when you try to share video and then suddenly it just like has I think my computer had a panic attack. So sorry about that. Where were we?
Was it computer or was it you?
Going back to what Ryan said a couple minutes ago about commits in the 2026 class. You've got the number 1 class in the country, Oregon, has 10 commits. Number 2, USC, obviously Big Ten flavor, at the top of the list here, with 11. LSU with 6. Texas A&M with 9. Auburn with 6. Ohio State with 4. Penn State sitting at number 7 nationally in the On3 team rankings and they have 8 commits. So some other notables.
Kansas actually has the most.
What's that?
Go down to 22. Kansas has 13 right now, but they're all 3 stars, so they don't rank that way.
Does that for it's been crazy with them, and that's going back a while. But Notre Dame's got 7, Alabama's got 3, Georgia's got 5. Some interesting ones that I was just going along here. Illinois has 10, and some good players in there, like Victor Singleton, a cornerback from Toledo. Cam Thomas is a linebacker who came and visited Penn State. I don't think he got an offer from Penn State, but from Ohio. So they are they're being aggressive in terms of taking some of these guys. That's an interesting one. Iowa has 7 commits. That seems like a lot for Iowa this time of year. Now, a lot of them are offensive linemen, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of them are Iowa kids or kids around, South Dakota in that general area. So that makes sense as well. But, you don't not a ton of juice for Iowa right now, but they have 7 commits in the 2026 class. And then North Carolina, very interesting because I think they're going to be kind of everywhere this year. They've got 7 commits. Their class is rated 37th nationally by On3. They've got 7 commits. Anthony Hall's probably the only overlap for Penn State. He did not get a Penn State offer. I guess they got a Zion Smith from DeMatha as well. So it's just an interesting collection of programs that you're going to go with. Michigan's got 4 commits right now. So it's just kind of all over the board for 2026, which is why we start with our rankings. We're only counting 5 players, right, or 5 commits right now. And that'll go up progressively through the cycle.
So I guess that's what I was wondering earlier in terms of, can you get guys to commit? Because are you going to get through the bidding war during official visit season? And can you get as many of those guys into your program as possible? If I were a small school, I would absolutely be thinking that way of like, can we get you to commit? Can we get you to be on board and find the guys that we don't have to bid against other people for? And again, I know we talked about this. Penn State should have more confidence than that going into official visit season, but we also have talked about the reality of the higher a prospect goes up the pecking order, the more effort's going to have to go into that from the NIL perspective. So the OV stuff we'll get to hear in a little bit, but I find that dichotomy or that situation very interesting of, front loading. Penn State's always trying to work ahead. You guys are always talking about working ahead. Peter Bork, 2027 quarterback. Where I know quarterback is different, but still, like, they already have their 26 quarterback a year early. How much can you get this done before the price goes up? Reminds me of, I've been obsessively watching Twitter recently of like all the pre-NFL stuff, all the pre-NFL free agency stuff. The sooner you get your contracts done with good talent, the better a deal you get over time. And I don't know if you can do that with everybody, but that's where I would be thinking. I would be trying to think, if I could, with prospects in recruiting.
Yes, I mean, they're involved with so many talented players. Like, you can't really compare what Illinois is doing to what Penn State's doing, though.
No.
There is some overlap there, Sean, but like Penn State, the guys that they really want are also being pursued by a lot of elite schools. So there's like that. I'm not saying it doesn't get more competitive maybe in June if a player waits, but at the same time, if player X, who's a top 150 player, makes it clear he's going to commit to Penn State and he's letting these other schools know, it's not like those guys aren't going to do everything they can bid wise or whatever it may be to keep that from happening.
Gotcha.
I think, sorry. Go on. I think there is overlap, but I also think there's like a natural slowdown for those guys that Penn State's going after just because of the level that they're going to be at. And like I said, these guys want to take official visits, not just to check out the school, but also enjoy themselves and enjoy the experience of it. Now, 3 weeks into June, they'll be tired of it, but at the same time, you probably have all the information you need at that point. So I think there's a natural slowdown to get you to June. And then the exhaustion kicks in, and that's why we see a bevy of commitments at that point.
That's why I'm going on vacation at the end of June, John. Just so you know.
And to be clear, what I was trying to say earlier is there's obviously a balance. You don't want to think small, and you want to make sure that you're going for the best possible talent. That's not what I'm saying. It's just the conversation around spring football, I feel like, is changing, or has changed already. Even from last year, where some of these conversations about this guy's going to commit, he's pretty clear that this would be a commit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now it just feels like at all is paused. It's all very much being pushed into official visit season. So it's an interesting thing, I guess, to point out, or at least to feel on the other side of where these things are. And Ryan, you guys are in it all the time. And I think you've adapted faster than somebody like me, who's sitting here on the other side talking to you guys every once in a while about this stuff.
That's all fair. I feel like that. Yeah, I would say that I felt that definitely last year and the year before that more than kind of what you're saying. It feels like this year. It's the OVs came sooner. So, from a public perspective, outside looking in, you can make that case. But also at the same time, we're what, 3-4 years in the NIL and all those kind of things. Like, I felt like that shift happened 2 years ago in my eyes.
Let's talk about coaches on the road, because this is something that you guys have mentioned that's going to be coming up after the Blue-White game. Fitz, you wrote about some of the coaching changes. Full story, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. What was interesting to you about some of the things you learned when it comes to who's going to be out there representing Penn State football, trying to get the next crop of recruits to join the team?
Yeah, probably spoke a little too soon when Stan Drayton was hired in terms of how much the older coaches want to be on the road, don't want to be on the road. And I sort of hypothesized that maybe a guy coming from a head coaching perspective or from a head coaching position maybe would let somebody else go out on the road for him. And we see that with Penn State's got its coordinators off the road. They've sent Danny O'Brien, Dan Connor, Kenny Sanders on the road. So I was just kind of, it's playing a what if game at that point. But Stan Drayton's going to go out on the road. He's going to have a territory like everyone else. He's going to recruit running backs nationally. But he's going to move back into some of the places where he's had a ton of success. Now, the elephant there is that the places that he had a ton of success were not far from schools that do really, really well in those areas to begin with. So Ohio State, Northeast Ohio. Most Ohio kids grow up wanting to go to Ohio State. So it's going to be a tough nut to crack, if you will. But no, I mean, he's been, I know you like that one. He's been active. Ryan, I know that you've talked to Messiah Mickens. You're going to have a piece then later today. So he's been active mostly with running backs. Sorry, don't mean to put you on the spot. But he's going to be active with running backs mostly, but also stick to some of those areas. And I think he can be successful. I mean, he's done it before. He's been out of that particular game for a while. He spent 3 years as the head coach at Temple. It's a different kind of recruiting as a head coach than it is as an assistant coach. And plus he spent some time in the NFL. So knock the rust off. I think he'll be fine. But he'll be out on the road as one of the Penn State's 10 coaches this spring.
He seemed to make it very clear that he was interested in coaching. He was excited to get back to the coaching aspect of coaching. And I don't know, maybe that's part of it too. Like there might be a renewed excitement on the other end of that, of like getting back into what you know and you were very good at.
I think Franklin's got a hard job, man.
Yeah.
Like it is not easy. I get like people want to talk all the Exitos and all this stuff and they critique this and that. But like, if you understood the daily day-to-day, like I get why they make the money they do. And I know that's not a popular topic because I know even Franklin's kind of down the pecking order a little bit compared to some, but it is insane. The amount of just BS that they have to deal with now. I could go on. We could have a whole show on that, but yeah.
Yes. And I think he kind of said that his wife was ready to kick him out of the house too. So, maybe going on the road's the best thing. Who knows?
My wife's been gone all week. I can't wait for her to come back. God. I don't know how single parents do it. If there's any single parents in here, salute.
Right there with you. Yeah.
Like you were talking earlier, like, oh, kids growing up. I was like, dude, this has been the slowest week of my life. There's been nothing about.
But when you look back, when your kids go to middle school, you're gonna be like, oh man, I missed out. Which you didn't, but you were there the whole time. So you just doesn't feel like it.
The fog of war.
One of those
made
weeks,
you not notice it.
Yeah.
Well, there goes Fitz. Let's talk about official visits, Ryan.
You guys got to move to Harrisburg, man. I'm telling you, what the hell?
I don't know
up there.
I don't know what's going on. But I do know that the official visit schedule and some of the new names, some of the new dates. I think the dates are almost as important as ex-players coming to visit because there is a priority and a pecking order of these. So who are the latest players that are coming to Penn State in the spring, and what do you make of the timeline there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly Brandon Arrington, elite cornerback out of California, setting up an OV. I think it was late last week. I don't believe we talked about it on the show. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But
no.
That one certainly grabbed my attention. Look, it is May 2nd, right? And this is what T. Frank's talking about when it comes to the timing of it, because he has a bunch of also other elite schools for June. A&M's in there, Oregon's in there, USC's in there, schools that you would kind of make more sense for Brandon, right? At schools that he's had longer relationships with too, let's be honest. But let's give Alan Zamitis and Terry Smith a lot of credit for just getting this one in, because what is his 100, Sean? Is it like 10-3 or something? It is insane. Like
it's faster than me. I'm not sure what the exact number is. And he's also 6'1", 6'2", something like that. Mm-hmm. So he's got some size to go. He's not a 5'7" sprinter. He's not Davon Smith here. So yeah, he can run. So
Nicholas Harper's the only one I can think of that's like was more impressive than the number she's putting up. Right.
I mean, Nicholas Harper, Nick Harper's an alien. So I don't know where we're at with that one.
Right. But my point is, let's see where things go. Do I expect a whole lot to come out of it? No. But, this is one of those ones where you have to take your shot. And I think Alan Zamitis deserves probably the most credit from this, from what I understand. I mean, this is a relationship he's been working on behind the scenes for a long time. And obviously Terry Smith's very involved as well. I don't want to look past that. But let's see where things go. And hey, maybe an early visit, leads to something more that, at the moment, maybe we're not expecting. But there's a ton of guys. I mean, Sean, is there anybody OV wise you want to hit on? There's like I said, there's been 5 or 6 just this week. I think since we've done a show, there's probably been closer to 10 guys added to this list. But again, we're at like 60 of them now.
You got there were a bunch of out of the regional footprint guys that I think popped up recently, and I find that interesting. So another guy, linebacker Kosi Okpala. What do you make of that in terms of going national with some of these recruits? Given that I think there's a pretty strong contingency in the footprint of linebackers for Penn State this year.
Yeah, give Dan Connor credit on this one. Again, he should end up at Texas. He's been to Texas a bunch. All of his unofficial visits are pretty much within the state of Texas. Right now, it's kind of hard for me to think that he's going to end up at a school like Penn State. At the same time, Dan Connor's done a really good job building a relationship here, from what I understand. Now, also, I'll stress that Cozy does not really talk to a lot of media. You won't find a lot of interviews that weren't the journalists going to him, if that makes sense, which is out of camp or whatever it may be. Like he's not picking up his phone for me, at least. I'll say that. I know that. But again, just from doing research, asking around, things like that, like there's a better relationship here than I think I realized. And that's why Penn State's going to get one of his official visits. If he's a take for Texas, I expect him to end up at Texas. Baylor and Houston are the other 2 schools that have official visits right now. So I think it says a lot about him probably staying close to home, but
yeah,
another one of those guys that I don't know if he actually, let me clarify. I wouldn't have been shocked 2 years ago if he would have taken one, just from, again, relationships and stuff from what I learned. And also people really stress that he and his family fit a lot of the things that Penn State's all about. Brandon Arrington's one of those ones where it's like, I've been really shocked if that happened 2 years ago.
Fitz, what sticks out to you? Anything interesting that you want to bring up here from a player or a player date perspective?
Yeah, a couple things here. Derek Cooper, the really, really highly regarded running back from Chaminade Madonna. I figured when Snyder left, that was it. Because Snyder is probably in it at Chaminade Madonna more than any other school, right? Does that make sense? At least been a presence there for a while. He's number 32 in the On3 industry rankings, number 3 running back nationally. He's going to take an official visit this summer. I don't expect a ton to come from it, but to still be on the list after Snyder leaves, I think that's a very interesting sort of counterpoint to everything there. So Derek Cooper is a really, really good back. I looked at him this week. He's got some jets. He's a good player. I mean, Chaminade Madonna is one of the most talented, rich schools down there, and we're going to continue saying the name because everybody loves it in the chat. So we've got that.
You beat me to it.
Yes. Ashton Blatt from Pittsburgh Central Catholic. I continue to be fascinated by the DN board because there are so many guys there, not hosting as many as Phil Troutwine is on the offensive line, but you look at the national guys that they're after. Now you can add Luke Wafel in that mix. You can add Carter Meadows in that mix with the big boost that those guys have gotten recently. But guys like Ashton Blatt, Jackson Samuels Ford, in-state guys who are really, really good football players that might stretch some numbers if you're talking about position wise. So defensive end, obviously a key for Dion Barnes, but not just nationally, not just the guys that everybody's going to be after. You can get some really good defensive ends by staying in state and having some of those players, especially good programs like Malvern Prep and Central Catholic. So there's that. The third thing here is looking at Terry Wiggins, linebacker from Coatesville. He's had an official visit set up to Penn State, but we talk about figuring out the competition, figuring out where you might stand. And sometimes you read that list and you say, Penn State should get this guy. He's going to go to Rutgers. He's going to go to Syracuse. Cincinnati's in there. A couple other programs as well. But Penn State, for a Coatesville kid, should be in a pretty good spot. So we're going to see where Terry Wiggins stands this summer. Penn State really likes him as an outside linebacker. He's kind of got that condor wingspan, and he can grow into. I don't think he's going to be a defensive end, but he's going to grow into a bigger, longer outside linebacker. And if he goes to Penn State, I think it's a pretty good fit.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's the linebacker board has been fascinating for me just to watch it evolve over time. And Ryan wrote about that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com last week. I want to say you wrote about that last week and some of the ups and not ups and downs, just some of the topography of what is different than you might expect. Messiah Hampton, he's going to take an official visit on May 13th. Good sign, bad sign. Penn State receivers felt really good about it heading into this time of year a week ago. Maybe still good about it, but not great where it was before. How do you feel about the signs pointing towards them being able to get 3 to 4 of their primary choices at that position, given some of the news and some of the places that the times that these guys are visiting? Ryan, that was for you.
Oh, you're talking to me? Oh.
Sorry.
I'm glad you are, because I wasn't listening at all.
Sean wrote the article. I assumed it was
having
for
a rough
him.
day.
Sorry. Well, first, is it the 13th or is it the 16th, Sean? Isn't it May 16th?
May 16th is the weekend of the Elite 11 All 22. So, yes, it's that weekend, and I'm very curious to see how that's going to work out, because I think some guys that are going to come to this, come to official visits, are going to want to camp, and I believe the camp is on Sunday. So you wrap up, you head over to, I think, State College High, or State College High's football field downtown is where they had it last year, and maybe that's a nice boost for that camp if you can get some of these guys on campus and get them around some of the commits that will be there, because I think there's going to be a handful of Penn State commits there as well.
So is it ideal compared to what we were thinking 2 months ago? No, I don't think it is, but I don't think when I look at the OVs he's setting, that's not ideal either. Oregon got one. They just recently offered. Miami, Ohio State, USC. These are all very prominent programs that can be aggressive, either showing what they've developed or financially. So, no, I don't think it's ideal. I don't feel like that's trending well for Penn State at the moment. What I would also stress, though, is that I really feel like as long as they can land one of these 4, out of the 3 Virginia guys or Messiah Hampton, maybe there's somebody I'm not thinking of, Sean, but I feel like we've been talking about those 4 the most. I think they'll be happy because they love Jasir Rogers and they love LeVar Keys. It's not fun losing Guilford, and they will take 4 if they get the opportunity. But I also feel like if they get to December and they have Jasir and LeVar still on board, added one of those 4 in, including Connor Salmon, Travis Johnson, Davion Brown, and obviously Messiah Hampton, I think they'll be okay with that.
Gotcha. Well, that's what I got. Fitz, you got something?
I think that we jumped to a conclusion with Messiah Hampton based on those official visits. I'm going to agree with Ryan. It's not ideal that they were not one of those first 4 official visits that was set, but I still think Penn State's pretty heavily in that. Mom is pretty heavily, I want to say heavily, but like she likes Penn State a lot. And Penn State usually can lean on those situations closer to home. They will be aggressive as they have to be. Now, obviously, Oregon, you see Oregon there, and you're kind of like, okay, you're going to see Ohio State's receiving board and see where that's at. And by the way, Oregon in there, Ross Douglas was the receivers coach at Syracuse, who just offered him at Oregon. So I think there's a nice little natural connection there, more so than just being interested in Oregon. So, but I do think Penn State's still in it. I think it's going to be a similar situation to those waiting for those official visits. It's going to be twists and turns until then, but I don't see a situation where those guys are jumping on board before official visits, all 4 of them really. Like maybe Connor Salmon decides that he wants to not wait, but then again, he's got a track season this spring, so he's probably not going to get out and visit a ton of schools for spring practices. So I think there's consternation there. I'm very curious if Guilford makes it back, if Jerquaden Guilford makes it back as well. So because I don't think that one's dead yet, contrary to past results and things like that. Right. When guys decommit, we usually say this one's done. I don't say I didn't say that this time, but we will very much wait and see, because he's a really good prospect, as Steve Frank and I talked about earlier this week, and he's going to have plenty of options, more options than he did when he committed to Penn State.
Well, that's what I've got for the show. Any last thoughts, Ryan? Anything else that I left on the cutting room floor that you want to talk about?
There was a question earlier I thought I saw somewhere, but I'd have to go back and try and find it. Sean, you want to talk? I'm looking through here.
No, you're doing a great
trying
job.
to see if I can find it.
But no, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I said it in the chat here, but Nate's working on some notes right now. I think there's some transfer intel in there, some team intel, and we're going to get the we're gonna get Chuck Losey later today, so I'm really looking forward to that. Check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you're following along on the podcast, if you're following along on Twitter, you're getting part of the story. BlueWhiteIllustrated.com is going to give you the whole story. So check us out. Hang with us this off season. We're posting a lot. Our staff is posting a lot, and it's just a fun place to be. Just a great place to be. And Nate's there, and everybody loves Nate. We know that.
Well, that'll do it for us this week on the BWI Live Show. We'll have more stuff, as Fitz mentioned. Chuck Losey coming up later today. We'll have some other content coming up on here on the YouTube channel. But we are off for spring break, so enjoy it. And we'll miss you guys. Hopefully you miss us. You can come back on what day is that? That is, because I'm going to look at the calendar, March 18th. March 18th, we'll be back. Until then, I'm Thomas Frank Carr for Ryan Snyder, Sean Fitz, Nate Bauer, and Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you in a bit.